Gen Z has had the misfortune of being born into one of the worst economic times in human history. It's damn near impossible to find a job, and even if you do find one, the wages are complete crap. As a result, a lot of Zoomers are looking to alternative paths to achieve financial freedom and escape the 9-to-5 grind. From exotic investments you've never heard of, to traditional financial markets like stocks and crypto, and for the first time ever, an S-tier pick that literally checks all of the boxes. We've thoroughly researched all the potentially viable paths to financial freedom we could find and put them all together in one comprehensive tier list for you. Let's get this show on the road. We're going to kick things off with an exciting and less well-known option that young investors always tend to overlook: real estate investment trusts, or REITs. I'm sure you all know real estate is perhaps the most consistent and reliable investment vehicle there is. Barring extreme circumstances, it almost always goes up in value. Unfortunately, investing in real estate usually just isn't possible for young people in their 20s, with no savings. However, did you know that you can invest in portions of real estate properties for as little as $10 without having to buy the whole thing? Real estate investment trusts allow you to buy, sell, and trade shares of real estate property the same way you do with stocks. But they're far less risky than most stocks and typically offer a steady stream of income via dividends, usually around 4 to 8% annually. They are required by law to distribute 90% of their income to shareholders, which means they're a pretty reliable source of passive income as well. Now, it's important to note that even though real estate is generally speaking less risky than the stock market, that doesn't mean the risk is zero. Anything could theoretically happen, from natural disaster to local economic turmoil to property mismanagement, and those things could all ruin your investment. So that's why it's always so important to do your own research. Also, unlike being a traditional real estate investor, you don't have any control over the property itself, and as such, you're at the mercy of the property manager. You also can't just live in the property as a plan B if the investment goes south. We're going to put real estate investment trusts in the B tier. It's a pretty low-risk, medium-reward investment with a low barrier to entry that's pretty accessible for most young people these days. The only thing that keeps it from being A or S tier is it's not going to help you if you need more money now and need to find a solution quickly. It's purely a long-term project that, generally speaking, will take 5 to 10 years before you see a significant return on your investment. Speaking of real estate, though I don't have any experience in real estate myself, one of my best friends happens to be an expert in this field. This guy escaped the rat race himself via real estate investments and has made nearly $1 million in the real estate market in just 5 short years. He's effectively retired, and he's not even 40 yet. I managed to convince him to give his opinion on the current real estate market for the purposes of this video. This way you guys can hear directly from an expert. Here are his words.
Pick an area that you think to yourself, "That's really beautiful. I'd like to live there." Chances are you're not the only one. Look up enough of these areas, and there's a high probability it's much more affordable than what you're used to in the West. If you have passive income or can work remotely, a lot of the world is your oyster. By buying property in a real estate-friendly environment, you can free yourself from mortgages and rent hikes. If you pick an area that goes up in value, in many ways, you are essentially paid to live there. And real estate is always going to keep pace with inflation as long as you pick a good area. You can also always hedge. If you pick an area you really like, but values do not go up, well, at least you like the area anyway, so you can just continue living there.
We're going to do something a little interesting with this tier list placement. I'm going to be giving you his tier list placement as well as my own, as we had slightly different opinions on this. He personally believes real estate is the literal best option there is, which is obviously a little biased. But his reasoning was actually not that bad. His logic is that everything else on this list is a method to eventually buy real estate because you have to ultimately live somewhere. For example, if you were an early investor in Bitcoin, you'd ultimately use that to buy a house, as you can't live in your Bitcoin. So he believes real estate belongs in the S tier. Personally, I think he's just a bit biased when it comes to this, as most young people don't have the capital saved up to make such a purchase. That being said, he did point out that there are properties out there that are more affordable than you'd think. This apartment in Italy, for example, is in quite a nice area and costs only $8,000. Though after renovation and other costs, you're actually looking at around $20,000. So personally, I would put it in the B tier. It just all comes down to if you can afford it or not. If you can, there's not a safer and more reliable investment vehicle for all the reasons we discussed. What do you guys think? Is he being biased or am I wrong? Let me know in the comments. All right, so now it's time to pivot to the more traditional finance markets that I'm sure you guys have heard of and have a lot of questions about. Bitcoin, crypto, and stocks. We're going to kick things off with Bitcoin, as this is somewhat of a specialty of mine. I was actually an early investor in Bitcoin myself, which is how I personally achieved financial freedom, but I must be objective and put my personal biases aside. I think the lottery ticket days of Bitcoin, where you could put $10 in it and become a millionaire, are gone. Best case scenario, you could average into it if you have some leftover money from your job, and over the course of a few years, see a significant ROI. There's still room for growth, but far from the extreme exponential growth of its early days. For these reasons, we'll put Bitcoin in the C tier. Being an early investor in crypto, I actually have to separate crypto from Bitcoin, as they're almost two completely different things. I'm putting crypto in D tier, as just about every promising project I got involved with in the early days has crashed and never came back. For the longest time, becoming an investor in the stock market was only available to the rich and powerful. But with apps like Robinhood, it's become much more accessible for average young guys, and hence, we got the rise of the retail investor. This is also something I have personal experience in, as I happen to be an early investor in Tesla before it really exploded. Unfortunately, I have to continue to be objective here, and I can't rank it above D tier as an option for Gen Z. It takes quite a substantial amount of capital to get started if you want to see results fast. Unless you plan to day trade penny stocks, which is incredibly difficult and unrealistic for most people, the reality is most young people just aren't going to have enough capital to where a 5% yearly ROI in the S&P 500 is going to make any significant difference in your life. Like crypto, being in the stock market can also be incredibly stressful and detrimental for your mental health, as the constant roller coaster of gains and losses is more than a lot of people can handle. If this were a list for older people who have more capital to invest, I might put it higher, but I just don't see it as a great option for most young people right now. If you don't have time to wait many years to see a return on investment as a traditional investor in the stock or crypto market, there is a way to make more short-term, immediate profits, and that is to become a day trader. As the saying goes, there's always a bull market somewhere, and if you learn the ins and outs of the market, it's possible to make a living as a day trader. Unfortunately, almost everyone who tries this fails as the market is so unpredictable. Even seasoned veteran investors who have been in the market for years generally fail when they try their hand at day trading. But this isn't even the worst part. The worst part is even if you are one of the very few who become a successful day trader, it is one of these most mentally and psychologically stressful jobs on earth, and there's no guarantee you'll do well all the time. Even the best day traders have streaks of bad luck here and there, where they lose lots of money. I don't think it's a viable option for 99% of people, and even if you are the rare 1%, it's still an incredibly stressful and difficult life. So, as a result, I'm putting this in F tier. Now, we're going to end the financial markets sector on a bit more of a positive note. An alternative to day trading is options trading. It's a bit of a complicated topic that would take an entire video to properly explain, but it's basically a lower risk, higher reward form of day trading. Think of it as a middle ground between being a safe, long-term investor and a risky short-term trader. Options also operate on longer, typically weekly timeframes, so the mental and psychological stress is considerably less than day trading. It does take some time to learn how it works, as well as to learn the market well enough to correctly predict market movements. But it can be learned reasonably quickly compared to acquiring an actual work-related skill. There are many different strategies you can employ with options trading to suit your personal goals. You can sell naked options for higher risk and higher reward. You can buy calls the normal way to mitigate risk. I believe this is actually reasonably attainable for a lot of people, way more so than day trading or being a long-term investor, so it's definitely something worth looking into. So with all that being said, I'm putting options trading in the B tier. Now, investments are a great way to build wealth and achieve financial freedom. But the problem is that they're all inherently risky, and there's no guarantee you'll ever make money from them. So our next section will be all about remote, online jobs. Ways that you can make consistent, guaranteed income without being trapped in 9-to-5 jail. If this tier list was done in 2018, this would be a solid A, or at least B tier option. Becoming a programmer was a very reliable path to a decent career, and it's actually possible to learn to code relatively well in as little as 6 months. Unfortunately, due to a variety of factors, the tech job market has become completely oversaturated now in 2024, and the few available jobs are generally reserved for very experienced senior programmers. It's very hard, if not impossible, to get an entry-level position as a new programmer these days. There's also the threat of AI replacing programmers, though, that probably won't happen anytime soon. Now, I'm not going to put it in the F tier, because it's still a valuable skill to learn, and it's not impossible that the job market could improve somewhere down the road. But as of right now, the job market is just so brutal, especially for inexperienced programmers, that I just don't see it as a great option for Gen Z. We'll put tech in the D tier. Now, this does come with one slight caveat. Just like there's many different types of investments, there's also many different types of tech jobs. While the traditional programming market is indeed way oversaturated at the moment, you can still get in less competitive, early niches like AI development and cybersecurity, where you'll have a better chance at success. So, for these more specific early niches, it can be a C tier option. There are many different types of businesses you could start, from dropshipping to e-commerce to digital products such as ebooks. Online businesses are nothing new. However, since the pandemic, they've really picked up in popularity. Platforms such as Shopify and Etsy have made it easier, cheaper, and more accessible for the average person as well. The most challenging part of starting a successful online business is getting started in the beginning. It can be really challenging to find your first few clients when you have no experience and no reputation. But once you get the ball rolling, it can really gain momentum and become a ticket to financial freedom. For example, one of my friends writes ebook guides for certain mobile games. It was really hard for him to initially build his presence in the community. But once he was able to do that, his website and ebooks really took off. And today he makes several $1,000s passive income per month from it. He then uses this money to travel the world and live in cheaper countries. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Once you put in the initial work of developing your product and finding a customer base, this can really scale infinitely, as there's no limit to how many people can buy your ebook or product. And while the startup costs are not free, they're certainly a lot better than most of the options on this tier list. Rather than a few $1,000s that's needed for most investments, you're looking at more like a few $100s for software and website hosting. We'll put starting an online business in the A tier. In the past, the main problem was that it just wasn't accessible for the average person, but that's completely changed in the post-pandemic era. The hard part now is just the initial challenge of getting the ball rolling. But if you manage to push through this initial barrier, the lifestyle that a successful online business will bring you is second to none. You can set your own hours, work from home, or while traveling the world, and the scalable nature of it means there's no limit to how much passive income you can make. It all just comes down to if you can get past the initial hurdle. Now, this one is going to be fun and interesting, as it's technically what I'm doing right now. It's also what the overwhelming majority of Gen Z kids want to be these days. There are a ton of myths and misconceptions around being an influencer, both in positive and negative ways. For example, the idea that it's too late to start is disproven by this channel itself. But I do certainly understand why it feels that way. What I will tell you is this: it's actually not as hard to become an influencer as most people think. But it's still very hard, and contrary to what everyone thinks, is not a get-rich-quick scheme for even the most successful influencers. It can certainly seem that way when you see the seemingly overnight successes. But the reality is, it takes years of experience and trial and error to really learn how to command attention and get views on YouTube or other social media platforms. It's ironic because, as a YouTuber myself, I feel like the pros and cons are exactly the opposite of what the general public thinks. The general public seems to think it's all about luck and natural talent, but they just think not everyone has the natural talent to become an influencer. The reality is it's the exact opposite. Anyone can become an influencer, but with a caveat, not everyone will become one. The reason for this is because commanding attention is a skill, and for most people, even Mr. Beast, it took years to learn and master this skill. The best way I can put it is this: people think it's more akin to becoming a Hollywood star, where it's all dependent on luck and natural talent. But the reality is it's much more like a traditional career, where it's about years of skill acquisition and education. So far, we've only talked about the road to becoming successful, but let's zoom out and talk about the end result if you make it. If you manage to make it as an influencer, there is literally no better job to have. You set your own hours, you can do it while traveling. You work where you want and when you want, which is a huge luxury almost no other job has. The financial rewards are also unlimited. Unlike traditional jobs, where you have a capped salary rate, YouTube is a business that theoretically can scale infinitely. The hard part is, of course, making it. But even though making it is hard, it's not quite as hard as people think, and the rewards are so incredible that I believe a C-tier placement is fair. Okay, so as promised, I do have one S-tier option that clearly stands out far and away above all the rest right now. This one pretty much checks all the boxes from low startup cost and low barrier of entry to being infinitely scalable and profitable, to being something you can do remotely and on your own time. This almost sounds too good to be true, but it's actually not because you are actually currently watching it right now as we speak. Our one and only S-tier path to financial freedom right now is starting an AI YouTube channel. I'm going to be completely transparent with you guys here, as a lot of you have been asking just how much of my content is AI generated. The only things I use AI tools for are the voice and the captions. Everything else from the script writing to the editing is completely done by myself and my friend who I started this channel with. In the beginning, we used to use InVideo AI for stock footage. However, we've since transitioned to our current style of background gameplay footage. Anyways, what is it that makes an AI YouTube channel such a good option right now? Through all my years of experience as an adult in this constantly changing economy, there's only one consistent way I've found to make serious, life-changing money. And that is to identify and catch a trend, a big wave, before everyone else catches on. I first learned this lesson as a crypto and stock investor, but I quickly realized that this applies to far more than just financial markets. For example, consider how everyone talks about how it was easier to grow on YouTube in the early days before everyone realized they wanted to be a YouTuber. Now here's the thing, right now I believe we have a 1 to 2 year window where making AI generated or assisted content on YouTube will be a viable get-rich-quick strategy. You are currently seeing all kinds of AI channels, from history to science to futurism, pop up all over the place. This is almost like getting to go back in time 10 years and start a YouTube channel before it got this saturated. It's even easier getting started, in fact, because unlike with traditional YouTubers, you don't need any fancy, expensive equipment to get started. A lot of these channels, with the help of AI, are able to mass-produce high-quality scripts and videos on all kinds of subjects people are very interested in. This is also how I can prove to you that I write all my own scripts. If I wanted to just make a pure AI-generated channel, I would just make some AI history or science channel, mass-produce a ton of AI-generated scripts and videos, and get exponentially more views than I'm getting right now. The reason I'm not doing that is because I still value authentic connection with my audience, with you guys, and I'm genuinely passionate about everything I talk about here, as you guys have probably noticed. But just because I'm not doing it, doesn't mean you can't do it. There are tons of tutorials on how to make AI videos all over YouTube, so if you're considering doing this, I'd hop on this trend as soon as possible. As I said, I predict it will only be a year or two before more people catch on and learn how to do this. And at that point, the market will be oversaturated and the ship will have sailed. So if you're watching this video around the time I'm making it, you have a golden opportunity to ride this wave before everyone else does. And to even further top all of this off, the extremely low overhead costs of starting an AI YouTube channel means that it's perfect for young people without much savings to start a revenue stream. As you can see, it literally checks every box imaginable, which is why it sits as our single, lonesome S-tier pick. Now, in this tier list, we've only covered ways on how to make a lot of money. But making money is only half of the equation when it comes to achieving financial freedom. After all, we've all heard stories of millionaires going broke. What's equally, if not more important, is learning how to minimize spending and save money. Believe it or not, there are actually ways to live very comfortably while spending less than $1,000 a month. And you can check out our other tier list video right here to learn how to do just that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you there.